Welcome back to DRS Dispatch. This week is the week of the 16th of March 2026. It is not a race week this week, it's a week off. Next week will be the Japanese Grand Prix. So today we will be covering everything that happened in the Chinese Grand Prix last week and all of the relevant news that happened in the past week. So let's get right into it, starting with the Chinese Grand Prix. So let's start off with the China Sprint, in which Russell claimed the victory at, with him being followed by Antonelli and then Hamilton, I think, if I'm not mistaken. I'll check the results in a second, but yes, George Russell managed to clinch the victory in his second win for the season. So yeah, massive congrats to George, but let's go through it lap by lap. Oh no, sorry, it was followed by Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton. Kimi Antonelli ended up coming fifth. So, still massive congrats to Kimi and a really solid result for the Ferraris, which you'll never see me complain about. So, as it happened, Russell initially held the pole off the start, though Hamilton was able to charge from the P4 slot. And I think Antonelli had another pretty bad start, if I'm not mistaken, as he was passed by Norris into turn 1. The Ferraris were able to fight back against Russell for a majority of the time, until eventually things kind of bottomed out, as they have been historically doing over the course of these two races. And it was kind of, yeah. So, Hamilton was back ahead outside of turn 1, as it says here, at the start of lap 2. And Russell and Hamilton continued to trade places over the remaining opening laps, which allowed Charles Leclerc to move from P6 to within range, as Norris and Piastri headed further back, creating a little bit of a gap between the Mercs and between the Merc Ferraris and the rest of the pack. Antonelli then made contact with Hadjar at turn 4, and he unfortunately continuing to suffer from a poor start from, I think, P2 on the grid, and he got hit with a 10-second penalty for this collision, which is unfortunate for the young Italian. As it says here, by lap 5, Russell had gapped the two Ferraris after a decisive move at turn 14, and Leclerc started to challenge his teammate by moving ahead up the inside of turn 1 at the beginning of lap 8. And yeah, overall they continued to go wheel to wheel throughout the remaining corners of the laps. Throughout the remaining corners a lap later. But Leclerc managed to remain ahead, which proved crucial. As a safety car meant the Ferraris were allowed to pit, but it unfortunately means they were forced to double stack, which I think meant Hamilton lost a little bit of time. Antonelli continued to steadily recover, passing the McLarens and soon coming up to challenge the Ferraris, as Antonelli attempted to pass Hamilton on turn 14 of lap 11, but Leclerc was able to get the move back only 2 laps later. And the safety car was called after Hülkenberg brought his Audi to a stop at turn 1, unfortunately suffering a little bit of an issue there, which is a shame for the Audi, as they were having quite a good run up until then. Antonelli served his 10-second penalty and ended up rejoining the race just in front of Piastri, which ultimately led to his P5 finish, as he was not able to kind of make up any ground, which is a shame for the young Italian, though he was able to get it back later in the weekend, but you shall have to wait and see for that, or I'm sure you already know if you watch the race. Unfortunately, Charles suffered a little bit of wheel spin at the exit of turn 14, which led to Russell gaining a decisive margin, which he then held until the end of the race. Hamilton was able to recover the P3 after he overtaked Norris around the outside of turn 1, but overall, it was a pretty solid race for George and a great race for the Ferraris. Unfortunately, a little bit unlucky with Antonelli, though he would recover his luck later in the weekend, of course. And overall, it was a somewhat okay sprint, I would say. Certainly, I think a lot of the racing this season has been bogged down by the Mercs being extremely dominant. And so a lot of it has just kind of been like, oh, the Ferraris are challenging the Mercs, not much more, not anymore. But yeah, overall, it was a pretty okay sprint. And I think another good result for George, who seems to be quite the dominating figure at this early stage of the season. Let's now move on to the actual Chinese Grand Prix, where Kimi Antonelli managed to take his maiden win, and on top of that, a maiden pole, with Hamilton also securing his first Ferrari podium. Massive congrats to Kimi Antonelli. I think it's amazing that he's able to get a win so early in his career, and certainly the future looks bright for Antonelli. So, I wish him nothing but the best. But let's get into how it happened with Antonelli, as it says here, becoming F1's second youngest race winner, I think being beaten by Max Verstappen, if I'm not mistaken, who actually won on his debut back in the day, if you weren't aware. But yes, as of early parts into the race, it seemed like George Russell could be on for quite a dominant weekend, though unfortunately that's not how things played out for the Briton, as he just had somewhat of a tricky race, which happens, unfortunately, suffering at the start, and then ultimately kind of dropping back a little bit before having to regain on the Ferraris, whilst Kimi remained to dominate. So yeah, massive congrats to Kimi. I think it's amazing after the somewhat tricky sprint he had. But yeah, shout out Kimi. Initially, Kimi lost his lead ahead of the Ferraris, though ultimately he was able to regain it and hold that P1 for the majority of the race, despite having a little bit of a moment towards the end of the race as well. And yeah, massive congrats to Antonelli. So let's talk about Ferrari, as Hamilton was able to secure his first maiden pole with the Scuderia, which I think is extremely exciting and certainly shows a lot of promise for the Ferrari after the messy last year. Charles was P4 as well. So certainly, I think if the Ferraris are able to gain a little more ground on the more technical development side of the sport, I think there's definitely a lot of hope for that team and for the Scuderia in general. So I wish them nothing but the best, of course. Though, even though the Mercedes pair had moved on up ahead, like is expected, Hamilton and Leclerc were able to gain a lot of ground back and have their own kind of entertaining solid scrap, which was exciting. Hamilton saying that he had so much fun, and Charles also saying that it was one of the most enjoyable races he's had in a long time. Let's talk about McLaren, who are having an absolute clanger of a season so far, with both Lando and Oscar suffering at the start and not even being able to start the race of the Chinese Grand Prix due to some technical problems. Obviously, Oscar has now yet to complete a single lap in any of the Grand Prix so far, which is certainly a setback for the dominating team. They've dominated the past 2 years, so I certainly think it's quite strange that they are so far behind now. And yeah, I think it's a shame for the McLarens, and obviously I'm a massive fan of Oscar Piastri, so it's a massive shame for him. And I hope that they're able to get on top of it and gather some ground back, because certainly it's not looking good for that team as of right now. As I said, last year, only 12 months ago, McLaren 1-2'd that race. So certainly interesting that they were not at all able to even start this race. And yeah, with both two entirely different problems, which is even more concerning for the team. So I hope McLaren are able to look ahead to Japan and get some advancements going there. So let's talk about Red Bull, who also struggled, Max Verstappen being very frustrated with the pace of that car. Seemingly, they're right now behind the Haas and the Alpine, which is extremely bizarre for the dominating team. And I don't think it's going to remain that way. I think we're still seeing a lot of early teething problems for these teams as of right now. And I think things will continue to improve as we kind of go into the future of this season, though obviously it's no good. And I wish Red Bull nothing but the best. Behrman and Gasly also expressed, as it seems the Alpine and the Haas are kind of topping the mid-pack right now, with some absolutely solid results for them. So massive congrats to those teams. So with all that being said and done, that was the Chinese Grand Prix. It was somewhat of a eventfully uneventful race, I would put it, as a lot happened, and it was definitely an interesting race, but it's to say that, like, whilst a lot happened, it kind of felt like things very much fell within how we were expecting them to go. And so there's just not really much to talk about, to be entirely honest. But massive congrats to the Merc, massive congrats to Kimi Antonelli, sorely deserved, and massive congrats to Lewis and Ferrari and Merc. And I hope some of the other teams are able to gain a little bit of ground up on the main leading two right now, because it just seems like a lot of teams other than those two teams are struggling right now, which is a shame. But let's get on to the news, the weekly news, starting off with our first story, which is Ferrari, who were set to run their interesting kind of 180 flip-flop wing at the Chinese Grand Prix. Ultimately, they ended up scrapping it for the race itself due to reliability concerns, which is understandable. But it seems like going into Japan that this will be the wing that they continue to run. And it's been rumored that this wing will kind of will give them a little bit of a extra boost of speed on the straights, which I think is definitely sorely needed for the Ferraris right now. And yeah, I think it's exciting that Ferrari is innovating and bringing in some cool, interesting components to their car, which is not something that we saw them do last year or historically at all. So shout out those WEC engineers that have been working at the Ferrari team that they brought in at the end of last year, and I have a lot of positivity for the Ferrari and how they'll go. And I'll be curious to see what other teams decide to do, or if this new wing has that much of an effect on the car's pace. We shall see. I think we'll have to wait another week for the Japanese Grand Prix. Let's move on to our next story, where we continue to see Aston Martin somewhat struggle. There's not really much to say. It seems evident that the Aston Martin is just not in a position that it needs to be in. I'm sure you've all seen that, or I'm sure a lot of you have seen that video of Alonso taking his hands off the wheel during the shake and shaking them, his hands off the wheel and shaking them due to extreme vibrations that he was suffering during that race, which I think is a massive shame. And I definitely think that Aston Martin will get good, but in terms of where it is at the moment, there just needs to be more improvement. Luckily, it's seeming like we're going to get some time off in April now, due to a story that I'll be covering a little bit later. But I think that hopefully should give a little bit of an opportunity for the Aston Martin engineers to try and play a little bit of catch up. And I wish them all nothing but the best, and hopefully that car is able to get in a more competitive position, because certainly it does look like an extremely competitive car right now. So yeah, we don't talk about that. Let's talk about the Oscars. Now, what does this have to do with Formula One? You're thinking, well, Formula One, the movie, was nominated for a whole variety of Oscars, and ultimately the one it was able to win was Best Sound. Which, out of all of the things that it was nominated for, I think this was probably the most deserved, I would say. And yeah, I mean, the sound in that movie was amazing. The way they were able to record it and all the sound design was incredible. So massive props to all of the people who worked on the sound department in that team. And I think it's an amazing honor for the sport. As we know, there's a sequel coming up as well that the Formula One is currently working on for the Formula One movie. So yeah, massive congrats to the team. Formula One getting more kind of widespread recognition from different industries is always a good thing, I would say. So yeah, our last story here. Oh, and before we move on, massive thank you again to the Formula One official website for the news stories, and massive thank you to The Guardian and Gilles Richards for this article here, where the Formula One has officially cancelled the Bahrain and Saudi Arabian Grand Prix due to the current Middle East conflict in the Middle East, which I don't think is all of that surprising. What I'm most surprised by is that it seems the races are unlikely to be replaced, or it's confirmed that they're just not being replaced because of logistical concerns, which is not all that surprising because you kind of have to set up these Grand Prix like almost a year in advance, and a lot of the time they are set up a year in advance. So yeah, I don't think, whilst it's a shame that the Formula One is just deciding not to host either of these races, cutting down the season to 22 races is not that surprising, and of course it's completely understandable. So yeah, I think it will overall be a positive for the Formula One season, because these teams will get essentially an extra month now to do some more development and some more testing. So I think that's really cool. So yeah, unfortunately it's a shame for this channel because there's not going to be any Formula One in April now, but that's fine. We'll find other stuff to cover, I'm sure. And yeah, that's it. Ooh. And yeah, that is all. So that was this week in Formula One. I hope you enjoyed. If there's anything I missed or anything you would like me to cover, make sure to leave it in the comments section below and I will cover it next week. Next week is the Japanese Grand Prix, so you'll have my classics predictions and thoughts on the Japanese Grand Prix, so stay tuned for that next Monday. And please and if you could, I would greatly appreciate it if you'd like, subscribe, do all that YouTubery stuff. I would greatly appreciate any support that you give me on this channel, and I hope you have a great, wonderful day. Thank you for watching. Bye for now. Peace.